Hi, everybody. Today I have on with me Jonathan Douglas, who is a nationally certified counselor and licensed mental health counselor as well. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So nice to have you. I was really excited to talk to you today, just due to your extensive experience as a clinical supervisor and just all of the different pieces that you bring to our practice and to your clients. So I just kind of wanted to start off by getting to know you a little bit. Tell me a little bit about you and about yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. It's nice to be here. Good to see you, Cassidy. About myself, I think, going into my 18th year, working in behavioral health in some form or fashion. I've been honored to kind of have a unique trajectory, starting in inpatient residential, some case management, some therapy, bulk of crisis work, working in settings like a hospital, jails, the community, actually working for my old college at Central Washington University, and then transitioning back to private practice, more case management and therapy. And here I am. My initial start was to be actually a geologist. Right? So I went to college for
Wow.
geology.
Yeah.
However, no geology rocks. I missed the interpersonal communication, right? Interpersonal aspect of it. And that kind of brought me back to the social work space. And then I landed in counseling, and I've been blessed to be here ever since. I don't quite feel burnt out. I feel like I've got a whole lot of energy because there's so many different things you can do in the field. So that's what got me where I'm at.
Absolutely. So, were you initially kind of going to school for geology, and then what was there any sort of like catalyst that was like, "Oh, I want to make this shift. I don't see myself doing this." Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I did a 110-point PowerPoint in high school on the Grand Canyon. I realized like geology is going to be my thing. I went to
Yeah.
school that really was great for geology at Central Washington University, dead center of the state of Washington. But as we got further in the program, I was missing the interaction with others, right? And I realized
Mhm.
math is not my strong suit, and there would be a whole lot of that. And I just yearned for more communication, right? More opportunities to like meet with folks, talk through things, and just be right. And geology wasn't really allowing that. There's a lot of field work. It was excellent, excellent program, but it was just something I missed. So I had to kind of do some retooling of my college degree, and I found communications. And then I found social work, and then from there I learned about the field of counseling and psychology, and that's what kind of led me down this trajectory.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it sounds like, connection is
Mhm.
something that you're really longing for. But I would say like social work in counseling, it's so much more than communication. In a way, like it's really like you have to be able to listen, you have to be able to be there for people and a lot of times a hard place of their life. So what drew you to that aspect of it? Because you could have just maybe been a journalist, or there's many different, realms of communication. What made you want to be there in maybe those tougher moments for people?
Yeah, that's a great question. How do I answer that? I think just the comfortability with being present with others. I think I bring a pretty inviting and disarming temperament. And I like being able to walk alongside folks through whatever they're dealing with, even though I may not fully understand all the details, but I at least want who I'm meeting with to feel encouraged. Okay, that we can get something done, right? We can at least move to the next moment. We might not solve everything, but me along with this individual who's claiming to be a helper we're going to help get me to certain places. And you mentioned a lot of different scenarios. I mean, some of the situations I've had to sit with people in have been pretty egregious. And it's encouraging when I don't want to say there's a light bulb moment, but there's some glimmer of, okay, I think I got it. Right.
Yeah.
I think I can do okay. Right. I think we can, you know, solve this problem or address this situation or at least make it to the next day. Right. Then kind of retool and
Mhm.
figure out what sort of comes next.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like you kind of had that self-awareness to see that, oh, like this is something that I kind of naturally do well, and that could serve others in that way. I
For
love
sure.
that. Okay. So I guess I'm just curious because we got a little bit into kind of how you work with your clients. It sounds like kind of like how you show up for people and you kind of work them through those tougher moments. How would you like describe your style if you were to say you had one?
Part of the first conversation I tend to have with clients is I give this metaphor of counseling, right? We're in a car together. The client's at the driver's seat. I'm in the passenger, and we're just taking a journey together. Sometimes I might have to say, hey, let's take this exit over there, but the client's going to go there. And maybe sometimes I need to kind of pull us back and going in this direction. Sometimes we got to look in the proverbial rearview mirror, kind of see what went on back there that might be leading to some roadblocks ahead.
Mm.
But sometimes
Hmm.
we might have to pause in the parking lot, kind of do some processing before we progress forward. My style of counseling is very much the client's the expert at their own being. I'm just kind of along for the ride to shine some things, point some things out. But then there's also a place for some education, or there might be a place for some directive counseling. There might be a place of just providing some support, right? A client might be saying something, feeling something, but having the opportunity to like put a label to it. Okay, so this is catastrophizing. Oh, this is grief. Oh, this is what anxiety feels like. Wow.
Mm.
Okay, let's sit and process that a little bit. So, I like therapy to feel like a conversation, right? I would definitely say I'm a more dynamic clinician. There's a lot of back and forth, and of course, if there's space for silence, sometimes I need to sit on my hands and just exist in that space. So I would say that that tends to be my approach to counseling.
So it sounds like you let them lead in some way, like you kind of see where they're open to going, and then you're kind of directing them through that process. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's spot on.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so is that like tied to a specific modality of therapy, or is that just something that you've developed along the way through your own?
Something that I think I've developed along the way. I mean, I integrate a number of therapeutic approaches through my just my daily practice, right? Foundations in CBT, but there is a lot of work of DBT and ACT of late has been kind of, I would say, kind of my strong suit. But I also like motivational interviewing, right? Where you, the clinician, you have to sort of pull back, be comfortable rolling with the ambiguity and kind of working through that ambivalence. One I think is a great challenge for helpers to not put themselves in a position where I need to fix it, right? Or this is the direction we have to go. So I'm going to force the client there. But sometimes we need to like, okay, is the check on the client's readiness? Like, is that actually
Mm,
where the client is wanted to go? Are they ready to go? What's preventing them from going there, right? So I like to incorporate some motivational interviewing through a lot of my work. One of my mentors, Dr. Hazlip in college, she always talked about just getting comfortable rolling with the ambiguity, right,
mm,
of session. And you see it in all many of the different fields spaces of therapeutic spaces I've worked in, how as a clinician, like you can't really go in there with your own agenda. Now, it's good to know, okay, so what sort of evidence-based practice am I gonna what framework am I looking at this in? But sometimes we need to set it aside and figure, okay, so what else do I need to integrate that could best suit this client? Right. So I think that's kind of my approach to things.
yeah, making sure that it's tailored and that you're really looking at the person as a whole and making sure that you're tailoring things to what's going to work best for them and in that specific case and scenario and at that time too, because I think timing is so important.
Yeah, I think whole person health, I would say, is a stays at the forefront of the work that I do. Right, so much of the conversation is around just symptoms, right? Whether it be symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of depression, symptoms of symptoms of substance use disorders, but then also how's their sleep, how's their movement, how's their social supports, how's their network? Like, there are
Mhm.
other things for the individual that we should address through this therapeutic journey that can help some of those symptoms all of a sudden not seem so much at the forefront, right? So we always want to make sure, you know, person's the sum of all of our parts, and we can't be so honed in on this without realizing, oh, there's all these
Mm.
other things going on in the individual's life that could benefit from doing some processing around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really, really important to understand not just, maybe what the mental health symptoms are that you're trying to treat, but also these different circumstantial factors that could be affecting this person. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, where did you kind of realize that that's going to play a factor in the work that you're doing with people, and how did you kind of integrate that into things?
Oh, it's a good question. I don't know if there's one standout moment, but I think it's just something that's been developed over time.
Yeah.
I'm going through a lot of kind of the post licensure trainings, you know, clinicians always talk about like whole person health, like thinking
Hmm.
of the entire individual beyond just the diagnosis, right? Yes,
Yeah,
diagnosis is part of treatment, diagnosis is part of the insurance process and all of that, but we're so much more than a diagnosis, right? There are other
absolutely.
things contributing to an individual's well-being and an individual's existence. So we would do ourselves no favors if we don't incorporate those.
Hmm.
The other thing that how it really stood out to me was I would say over the last, let's see, 2026, last 5 or 6 years, right? When you're starting to realize just the how fast news is traveling, right? The
Hmm.
critical things happening would be locally, nationally, internationally, use of social media and how much everyone's kind of bombarded with information. The trend I noticed with many of my clients, like the general level of angst is rising. Right. And I was listening
Mhm.
to a podcast, I can't remember the name of it, but it talked about recognizing when the central nervous system of a community or even a nation
Mhm.
is dysregulated, impacts to the individual, it impacts down to the individual. Right. So we have to start looking
Yeah.
out. If this person in front of me is obviously dysregulated in some form or fashion, how then can we get to a reasonable part of regulation without them feeling as though they need to be baseline? Because that's not realistic. That's not life. Like they are going to have some of these highs and lows, but we don't want these major spikes. So how can we kind of get things within this kind of this good window that we can function in, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't always have to be okay. Well, today you're going to only focus on this CBT skill. Today you're only going to
Yeah.
focus on this DBT skill. Well, how's your sleep? Right? Do we need to work on some sleep hygiene? Do we just need to work on some movement? Do we need to work on connecting with folks twice a week? Right? Folks that kind of feed your soul and
Mhm.
reassess, okay, how are things going? I think I answered your question. I might have kind of gone all over the place, but
Yeah, no, you definitely did. Thank you. That did actually bring up another question for me in regards to just, the society as a whole, especially kind of in the United States and just the pace of news and the things that are going on outside of really the individual's control in a lot of ways as far as what they're receiving. How do you feel like therapists can play into that and help people? Like, how do you see therapy as a whole if we can't necessarily stop people from, being stressed about these things, but yeah, how does therapy play a role in that to help the overall anxiety level for people?
for the clinician themselves to be able to practice radical acceptance, right? To
Mm,
know what that actually looks
mhm.
like in their own their own existence, right? But their own life.
Yeah,
So
their
because there's going to be a
experience.
big part of that that will come into the clinical space, right? If I'm
Mhm,
trying to instruct a client, because what is radical acceptance? A client may receive that as giving up. A client may receive that as you all just not care. A client might receive that a sort of way, but we then speak to like, well, here's what you can actually get from acceptance here. It doesn't mean we're being passive. It doesn't mean you're affirming. It doesn't mean you like it or you're accepting because this is the reality. Now, what sort of bandwidth do I have to now navigate what's going on? Right. So I think the therapist's ability to like demonstrate that and show that because
mhm,
there are going to be some things that we just have to accept as to what's going on. Right? But there's also places for us to find some empowerment, right? And then to be
mhm.
encouraged, at least with all this going on, at least I can do this, right? This whole
Yeah,
sense of agency. And a lot of my work, we kind of get to talking about agency, right? How a person can identify, okay, so how much agency do I have and what does that look like? It's going to look different for everyone, right? Given the circumstances that they're having to deal with.
yeah, absolutely. I think that that's really important to note. Like, there are always going to be things outside of your own, individual control and personal control, but there's always going to be pieces that you can control. And a lot of that is, your reaction to things and your response to things. And so having someone to mirror that for you and also model that for you, I think is so important for, people in general. I did want to touch base a little bit on, the clients that you currently see and what you think, your style as far as like how you relate to your clients. Is there a certain type of person that you think works really well with you or that would be like your ideal client if you had to say?
Yeah, yeah. The ideal client, I would say, would be someone who I'm not feeling like my best self. I just don't exactly know what's going on, right? Maybe
Hmm.
I was performing well at work, but all of a sudden there's been this drop off, and I can't really pin it on something. It might be the client who knows there's a version of themselves that functions better, but may not
Hmm.
know. Okay, how do I close that gap to get there, right?
Yeah.
Someone who's willing to kind of be challenged, right? Someone who's willing to say, well. I should do this. Okay. Well, if I were to ask, well, help me understand why you're not doing that. Right. And what is kind of maybe a 1% thing we can do towards that end goal and let's start actually practicing doing it, right? And then kind of get some feedback from that. I've been enjoying working with a lot of males, right?
Hmm.
Especially ethnic minority males over the last several years. I've noticed that's been part of the bulk of my caseload. There's so many layers there that come up when working with men, right? And that's been something I've really been enjoying doing because there's a lot of similar themes between each male identified person who I've been working with. So I think I answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so what do you feel like for those, maybe men out there that are I don't know if I need therapy, or I'm not sure about that. But maybe they feel some resonance to what you're saying. Like, what would you say to them? Like, how would you maybe encourage them to take the next step?
Yeah, yeah. What have you been doing? If the thing you've been doing for a while is kind of either leading to the same issues or things getting worse, then what's the harm in trying something different? Because also in doing so, we get to really sit and talk about, okay, so what is the resistance to therapy? What is the resistance from getting help? And oftentimes those conversation goes straight to things like insecurity, things to, well, as a man, you need to figure it out. Whilst that's true, you also don't have to go it alone. Right? To kind of poke some holes in the whole lone wolf ethos. Typically in the wild, the lone wolf doesn't survive. All right.
Mhm.
The lone wolf needs a pack. Like we need a village. And that conversation oftentimes rolls into, I don't think I created the concept, but it just resonates with me. For a lot of the gentlemen who I've been working with, there tends to be this kind of an inverse pyramid of social connections. Right? So whether it be going through our teenage years or early 20s, we have sports, we have college, we have just things you do, a lot of friends, but then all of a sudden
Yeah.
career changes, by advancing our career, and all of a sudden our support system starts going this way, right?
Mm.
Whereas now the people who I'm spending time with, I'm like, well, we're kind of acquaintances, we're kind of buddies, but there may not be this genuine sense of, okay, I can lean on this person, right?
Yeah.
Or if I need advice, when I really talk to that person, because they might tell me what I need to do. I mean, I don't need to be told what to do. I just need someone to be there with me, right? But if I'm a
Yeah.
bunch of other men who don't really know how to sit in discomfort, then that may also be hard. So be able to identify, okay, so what is support? Like, how are we dealing with loneliness? Right? Are we able to delineate alone, lonely, solitude? Like, how are we managing that and not turn to maladaptive coping skills? Right? Which there's a whole lot to list, but that tends to come up a lot in the conversations I have with a lot of my males.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that, for men, there is kind of this, like, there's a societal aspect to it as well, with what men deal with, is that they're raised in a certain way, and then they grow up thinking that, you kind of do just have to figure it out, and you don't turn to help, even if you think you might need that. So I'm really glad that you're there for those people that need someone in that time, because it can be really, really challenging to get to the point to actually, ask for help and show up in that way.
One of the standout, I guess, strategies I've learned through just Socratic question. One is just according to who, right? Oftentimes in a conversation, the client may say, well, I should be doing this, or I don't need to do that. Well, according to who, right? Like
Yeah.
let's sit with that and figure out who the who is.
Yeah.
It might be an identified person, whether it be another peer, a parent, another support person, celebrity, even, right? But
Mhm.
then default question is, well, what barrier does that person have on your life right now? And let's
Mm.
say you are to do something that is not in accordance with what that person would say. What does that have to mean, right? That leads to some interesting conversations, right? Where folks are like, well,
Yeah.
I guess just according to just how it's been. Okay. Well, if how it's been isn't working now, do we not owe it to ourselves to kind of try something different? Right. And then test results. If that doesn't work, well, what else can we try? Right. Because the main fact is we're trying to do well for self. We're trying to do well for others. Right. So we
Mhm.
owe it to ourselves to actually put the work in to get there.
Yeah. No, I love that. I gotta remember that. Because yeah, you kind of just naturally tend to adapt these voices, or like these, people that have made an impact in your life, and you'll just kind of get these little clips of something maybe they've said, or things that you think that they think that you should do. And so having someone that can really mirror that and remind you, well, you actually don't have to, replay that in your head this time. You can actually change the story and adjust the way that you're responding.
Yeah. And also be able to affirm, like, at some point that worked, right? Whether it be
Yeah.
that
Served you.
statement, whether it be that motto, whether it be, that affirmation that you might have received, like it's worked. So we don't want to necessarily dismiss it like, oh yeah, you should never think that way, or that's bad, get rid of it. But recognize, like, yeah, that probably served a purpose, right? It probably was a protective mechanism along the line some way. But also what happens now when that's kind of bumping into reality, where that approach, that mindset, that thinking pattern, what happens if it doesn't work, right? Does it have to mean anything about you? Or could we be a bit more flexible in terms of how we move into the next moment, deal with the next challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with that. I feel like you do have to, give credit where credit is due, where things have maybe gotten people to where they are today, but they're coming to you for a reason to make some adjustments. And so I think being able to do that and ask the hard questions is really important. Um, Okay, well, anything else you feel called to share, maybe to a potential client who's watching this or just in general about you?
Therapy can be a very uncomfortable, but a very empowering place as well. There's also a quick aside. There's also a lot of places to get some form of therapeutic information, right? Whether it be Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, Google, right? But even that, take that with a grain of salt. Like actually meet with a therapist, right? Meet with a therapist, get to know your therapist, realize this is a relationship that's being built. A relationship, there's going to be friction, there's going to be progress, there's going to be delays. But it's okay to do the work with the person that you trust, right? The other thing I'll definitely say, I know I'm kind of in a unique situation, right? And there's a lot of privilege that I have with having my licensure, being in private practice, but also recognize, well, I'm a black male, right? And as a black male clinician, like I wear that badge proudly, right? And I want my identity as a black male to also look at for that are ethnic minorities, right? Because even within that we mentioned earlier about kind of the male socialization, another layer there is just within cultures and with the community, like we keep our stuff in home, right? Over there, we don't go to that sort of stuff. Like some of that modeling needs to be deconstructed. Right. So part of my role as a clinician is I want to see more ethnic minority males and males in general come to therapy. It can be what's the word I'm looking for? Fulfilling. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. There's other places in your life that can feel so much more fulfilling when we get ourselves right. That'd be the message I'd send out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like a lot of that has to do with, intergenerational trauma as well.
Mm.
It's like kind of breaking down those barriers that, you've had to build up, and to protect yourself. And so that's really powerful. And I really do, encourage people to seek help and get the help that they may need. But thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining me today.